Welcome back to CodingCat.dev, where we give you cats the freshest dose of dev snacks. Brought to you by Cloudinary. Build faster with AI-powered image and video APIs. Welcome back, perfect peeps, to CodingCat.dev podcast. Today on the show, we have Saron. How are you doing, Saron?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's nice to have a long weekend and kind of get back in the run of things. So
absolutely.
I've heard it two different ways, like President's Day / George Washington's birthday. So I don't know what it was, but
all right, yeah. I thought it was his President's Day. I didn't know about the George Washington part, but cool,
heard the
sure.
Washington thing either.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So later on in the show, we'll talk all about Not a Designer. That's probably how many of you know Saron, and that's how I came to know of you. So that's pretty awesome. But first, before we do that, I want to get to know you more and dive into your past and kind of your journey throughout. So can you get us started a little bit on, where you began, where your roots are?
Sure. I feel like it's a little bit of a long story, but I'm happy to dig into it.
Yeah,
cool. So it all started for me when I first got into tech. I was working in non-technical roles. So I did a lot of like marketing and sales and a lot of things that were helping out the startup, helping out the company, but wasn't actually building product. And I did that for a couple of years, and I kept kind of looking over the engineers and thinking, man, what they do is so cool. Like they get to actually build stuff and make the screens and make the apps. And it just seemed so much more interesting than what I was doing. And I always wanted to like cross over and kind of get to that side. And then finally, a couple of years in, I decided to pull the trigger and do it, and decided to teach myself how to code on the side. And I decided that I liked it enough that I wanted to quit my job to focus on it full time. And I said, I'm going to give myself a month. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to code for like 12, 16 hours a day. Clearly didn't have kids at that point. And I'm going to just, focus all in on this coding thing, see how it feels. And if I like it, if it works out, then, maybe I'll do like a boot camp. Maybe I'll go back to school for a computer science degree. I'll do something kind of more serious. Let me test out my own interest and my own resolve. And so I did that, and I loved it. I loved it so much. It was really hard. It was super painful, but the highs were always better than the lows. You know what I mean? Like every time things worked, it was so much more exciting than the frustration of it failing, right? So the net positive was definitely there. And so I took that and I said, I think I'm ready to go all in. I think I'm ready to kind of dedicate the next part of my career to this. And so I was trying to figure out, do I do a boot camp? Do I do a computer science degree? Is there something in the middle? And ultimately I went with the boot camp. I went with the Flatiron School, applied and got accepted. And it was really that experience that changed things for me, because I finally had a community of people there, which was extremely exciting. I had people who understood the highs and the lows and who were just, on the journey with me. And that really changed the experience so much. And what bothered me about that experience was knowing that if you didn't go to a boot camp, if you didn't go to one of these expensive programs, and back then it was, only $11,000. Now it's like $20,000, $30,000 for these programs. So it's gone up significantly. But back then, if you couldn't afford $11,000 out of pocket, because there was no income share agreement, there was no loans, there's no, like, you either had it or you didn't, you wouldn't be able to find that community. I feel like now there's so many communities online, but back then there really was nothing. This was like 10 years ago. There was really,
what was like your dedicated time for Flatiron? Like, how was that?
It was a full-time program. It was a full-time program. Yep, you go in 40 hours a week. I think it was like 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or something. It's just like a regular job kind of thing. But a lot of times we stayed after to do homework together, right? Because like the TAs would stay, and sometimes they would have like evening demo nights, and at the end there was a big science fair. So there was always like stuff and activities to kind of keep us busy for sure. Yeah. And so I didn't like the idea that if you couldn't afford to do a boot camp, you basically had to do it on your own. And that felt really lonely, and it felt really unfair. And I really wanted a way to create community for people who didn't have that type of experience. And so I started doing these Twitter chats. Back then, Twitter chats were all the rage. I feel like Twitter chats got replaced with like Twitter Spaces now. It's like the new thing. But back then, like, you really built community through Twitter chats. And so every Wednesday night for an hour, I would tweet out questions relating to coding and getting people started. And I would use the hashtag #CodeNewbie, and people would respond and kind of get together and chat and talk. And that really became like its own thriving community in of itself. And so I did that for maybe about like 6 months. And I said, I think this is really great. People are making friends, they're building connections, they're having a great time. But I really want to dig deeper. I really want to like focus in on a story and really like unpack it and explore it. And so I decided to do a podcast. And I thought, I used to work at NPR, and I thought audio interviews were a great medium for that kind of exploration. So I decided to do that. And 2 months into doing the podcast, I got an email from a company who said, I'll give you $200 if you run an ad on your show. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can make money from this.
I wish I could get those phone calls. I always have to.
Right. I don't know how they found out about me. I don't know how that happened. But that was the first time where I thought, oh my goodness, maybe this can be sustainable. Maybe this can be a proper business. And I started thinking kind of along those terms. And that really kind of shifted my thinking of this side project I was doing to a proper company. And I started taking it more seriously. And for the next couple of years, I treated it as a proper side business, as a side gig, making a little bit of money. And eventually it made enough money that I was able to quit my full-time job, and I was able to do Code Newbie full-time. And awesome. So, yeah. And so we launched another podcast with my friend Vaidehi Joshi on computer science fundamentals. We launched our CodeLand conference that we've been doing every year. We launched meetups all over the US. We had like a newsletter course that we did. So we launched a bunch of different content initiatives, and I was able to run that successfully for a couple of years. And then that got acquired in 2019, end of 2019 by the Practical Dev.
I have to like take 10 steps back before we get too far. I did my LinkedIn stalking, as I like to call it, or kind of some prep before our chat, and I'm curious about the University of Maryland piece to this. And one reason like I really want to dive into this a little bit is because you have a BA in English and a BS in psychology, like an MBA, and now we're talking about coding stuff. So, like, how did that all kind of play into this? And like, what was your path through school even then?
Well, actually, so it's funny that you asked that, because when I was, the only reason I was a BA in English and BS in psychology was because I was pre-med. Okay. And when you're pre-med, you can pick whatever major you want. It doesn't really matter. So I picked just things that I was interested in. I really liked writing, and I really liked psychology. So I just picked those things. But in hindsight, I would not have picked those if I was not like trying to go into med school. But I was very seriously like on the pre-med track. So I took so many, by the time I graduated undergrad, I had enough credits to get 3 separate degrees. Like, I took so many credits. I took summer classes, winter classes.
You were like an organic chem teacher, like
I was an organic chemistry tutor. I loved organic chemistry. I was very, so this is what happened. So in high school, so I'm an immigrant. I'm born in Ethiopia, raised in the US. I came here when I was 3. And I went to a magnet program, which was, you had to apply to get in. It was very much about like communication and media and the arts and liberal arts and stuff. And I was in a school full of people who were very like upper class, who were, in hindsight, I don't think I really appreciated this when I was a kid, but like they were wealthy, like they were well off, they had their stuff together, and the biggest difference between my upbringing and their upbringing, I came from like a middle class, household. My parents were pharmacists. We were comfortable. We were fine. We weren't rich, but we were fine. But the thing that I didn't appreciate is that because I was an immigrant and my parents didn't do undergrad here, didn't go to the school system, we didn't know what the process involved. Like, I didn't know that that you could do an internship in high school. Like, that was news to me. I didn't know that you could get, scholarships from like the PSAT. I thought the PSAT was a practice SAT. Like, I didn't realize that actually carried any weight. I didn't know about extracurriculars. There were all these things that I went into college completely unaware of in terms of how to apply and how to write a good person. I mean, all my peers had special tutors and special counselors they were paying for and all these things.
Yeah.
And I just had like the free guidance counselor who kind of gives you the bare minimum, you know what I mean? And who's not really pushing you. And my parents didn't really know the process.
That's funny,
And,
like, you're talking
yeah.
about that because, like, I'm going through this same thing. So I was basically first gen to go out to university, and, like, my experience versus my wife, who went to U of M, University of Michigan, had a completely different experience. Like, she knew a lot of that, and I knew nothing of it and learned about it later on. But now
when it's too late, right?
Yeah.
When I can't help you.
But now, like, my son's about to turn 15, so we're having a lot of these discussions about, like, where to find scholarships and things like that. And it's amazing to me, like, as I go through this and learn even more about what you were just talking about with, like, bringing in someone to coach you through SATs to get, like, police fire, like, didn't even have a clue about that.
idea.
And, like, all of our friends, their children are now either in university or, like, almost getting out of it. And, like, now we've learned so much more about this too. So it's interesting, to say the least. And I couldn't imagine coming from another country to try to figure all that out. Like, it's
just didn't know. And it wasn't until college that I looked back on it and I was like, oh snap, like that's how you guys got into those schools and did those things and got those, like I just didn't know.
People
so
didn't even tell me, like, you could test out of things. I was like, what?
Yeah. And so when I got to undergrad and I realized how much I didn't know, I was very determined to know everything. So I met with my pre-med advisor like every month for like all of undergrad, and I was very on it. And I did all the research I could, and I became a published author, and I became a tutor, and I started like an on-campus organization. Like I just threw myself in, like getting all the accolades and the best resume that I could to get into med school. And then, of course, I think it was either end of junior year or beginning of senior year, I actually started shadowing a doctor and was like, oh crap, I don't like this. I don't want to do this at all. And I became the senior that I judged so hard, where I was like all of a sudden so lost in my career. And I was like, I worked so hard to make sure I was prepared. I spent so many tears, so many sleepless nights, pulling all-nighters, like doing all this work to get into school. And now I don't even want to go there. And now I don't know what I want to do. And I felt so lost and confused. And it was just, and my parents were so disappointed. I mean, they're fine now, but like back then they were so upset with me because they were like, oh, we're going to have a doctor in the family. And I was like, so it's not going to be me.
If I put the timeline together, like you went through that whole experience, and like, did you get your MBA prior to the Flatiron piece then?
No, I got my MBA recently, actually. I got my MBA in 2021. Yeah. So it was like years after I did the bootcamp thing, years after I became a developer.
But the bootcamp came after this like discovery of like, I'm not going to be a doctor. I need to figure it out. Okay.
Yeah. I was around like 24, maybe 23, 24 when I did the bootcamp.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a couple years out of school where I was feeling lost and confused and trying to like figure myself out. And then MBA came around actually because I really like technology, but I like the business side more. And I wanted to kind of lean into the business side of things. And I wanted to know how to do that like properly, you know, like I wanted to kind of see what does business school actually teach you as a self-taught, you know, founder. I felt like I was kind of making stuff up. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was kind of all over the place. And I really wanted a place where someone could just give me direction, like just tell me what to do, you know? And I was really looking forward to being in a classroom again. And so, yeah, I applied and got into business school. And of course, I think it was like a semester in, I was like, I don't think I want a job. I think I just want to start another business. So then I just started another business.
That's awesome. I mean, you seem like such a go-getter. Anything you tried, I think you're going to be successful at, right? So,
oh, thank you. I try. Yeah. I try.
For sure. Yeah. And then like that, I think if I'm reading it right, that kind of leads you on a journey. Like I see PM in here, the Code Newbie piece we were just talking about, which Code Newbie, if I completely cut you off on that piece.
No, you're good.
You were acquired. That was by Dev.to folks.
Yeah.
And that's become more, right? How they
what do you mean?
integrated the Code Newbie piece in. How did that merger? How did that look?
Yeah, so it was Ben Halpern, who's the founder of the Dev, and I don't know if people remember this, but the Dev actually got started by the Practical Developer, was like their Twitter handle that like blew up. They had all these like memes and all these hilarious like, you know, developer jokes and stuff they did, and they transformed that energy into a platform and created a community and created like a blogging platform, which is really cool. And so, yeah, so I've known Ben for a number of years. I've known Ben for about 5 years, and
Nice.
I was talking to him one day. We had like a catch-up coffee, and I was like, you know, I'm trying to figure out kind of where to go next in my career, and I kind of feel like I've kind of done everything I can for Code Newbie. It feels like it's at a stable place where it can kind of keep going on its own, but I don't feel like I can build it into something beyond what it is. And I think that I've kind of reached personally the end of the journey for me. I kind of want to move on to something else and trying to think about what the next steps are. Like, do I shut it down, which I really didn't want to do? Do I get like a manager to just kind of run it and pay them a salary? Do I try to get it acquired? Like, what's kind of the right shape for it? And as I was kind of talking to him and giving him like a catch up, he goes, yeah, we'd love to acquire it. Like if that's an option, that'd be great. And I was like, I would love for you to acquire it. If that would be amazing. It took a while to get there. I think it took about a year since that conversation to kind of sign all the paperwork and get it all done. Nice. But basically they just kind of like took all the assets and all the projects that I was working on my own, and they, you know, kind of integrated it into the Dev ecosystem. So yeah, it's worked out well. Yeah.
I think last I checked, Code Newbie's on like season 26.
Yeah, it's a lot. We've done hundreds of episodes.
Crushing it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think this is probably a good pivot point. I'm going to take a little ad break, and then when we come back, we'll talk a little more on Not a Designer. Sound good?
Cool. Sounds good.
All right.
Cloudinary allows you to remove any unwanted backgrounds, so you can reuse assets efficiently. You can also erase objects and people from images for placement in new experiences. For more engaging content, easily turn static images into dynamic animations, and rely on smart cropping to always deliver assets with a focus on the most relevant objects to your brand. Cloudinary Programmable Media. Build faster with AI-powered image and video APIs.
Thank you once again, Cloudinary. Super appreciate the sponsorship and also hosting all of our images and assets.
Nice.
Okay, so we talked a lot about Saron's kind of upbringing, how she got, in the U.S., went to university, all of the fun stuff that led her all the way to Not a Designer. And now we're going to break that down a little bit. So Not a Designer's tagline is Design Bites for Devs. Let's level up together. What's that mean? For me.
Yeah, so that is, so it started off as a project for my startup. So I have a startup called Disco, and we are all about figuring out how to support people with multiple streams of income. So what we found is that there are a lot of people like myself who, have a job, but who also have other ways of making money, whether it's speaking, whether it's consulting, whether it's a newsletter, kind of different things, a different kind of other things that are put together to generate our own revenue. And in doing that, I wanted to find a way to kind of support that. And I wanted to kind of put myself in the position of someone who is a content creator. I create content through Code Newbie, but because it's not like my content anymore, it kind of feels a little bit differently. Sure. And so I wanted to know, what does it feel like to create my own content? And I feel like when I was looking at the landscape of content creators, newsletters was one that was really interesting. It was really popping off. I feel like as of maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it became like really mainstream again and got really popular. And I was just really interested in figuring out, how do people do newsletters? Like, what does that look like? How hard is it to keep up with it? How do you monetize it? How do you grow it? I was really interested in that space. And so I wanted to come up with a newsletter concept that would help me kind of understand that world a little bit better. And so I came up with the idea for Not a Designer. And the goal was, I am not a designer. I'm a developer by trade, but I've always loved design. I've always loved creating things. And I've always loved, I love Figma, and I love doing prototypes and landing pages and designing stuff. But I've never been like trained, like I've never taken a course. I've read like a book here and there. I've watched some YouTube videos, but I haven't been like properly trained as a developer. And so I thought to myself, I really want to level up. I want to like be like a good designer. I want to feel like I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. And I thought, let me build this newsletter where I can kind of learn and teach at the same time, where I can spend a bunch of hours, Googling, researching, reading, watching videos, taking courses, reading books, synthesize that, distill it down into a single article, and then share that article with people who are also similarly wanting to level up. So that's the idea. Initially, the goal was to create these little design bites of information, but my newsletters are very long, so they are no longer design bites. They go on for like 2,000 words each. They take forever to write. So they're more like deep dives and walkthroughs more so than bites. So I need to like update my tagline. But it's been a really great way for me to learn and level up, while also kind of putting on my creator hat and understanding what that world looks like and how that world feels. So yeah, that's been the story of Not a Designer.
That's really cool. I love kind of the concept. So James Q Quick was on one of your posts, probably one of your most recent posts, and we're in a community called Learn, Build, Teach. That's what we preach.
That's the idea. Yep, exactly. I love that slogan of his, the Learn, Build, Teach community. I think that's really great.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. So
yeah.
Where do you see? Before I ask that, I've gotta get to the bottom of your kind of newsletter. I see that you use Beehive.
Yes.
I'll show to the folks watching on video.
Yeah.
Pretty neat. I looked into this once we scheduled the podcast. How has this been, and how is this helping you grow your newsletter?
I love it. I love Beehive. I think it's a great platform. I feel like it really gets out of the way, and it really focuses on the editor, and it gives you all the tools to create a blog style newsletter, right? And it really is focused on creating like a streamlined, clean interface that helps you just focus on the writing. And it gives you some minor control, like some branding and some design elements, but really you get to focus on the writing. And for me, like I just care about the writing. I care about putting in some simple images, and that's really what I'm here for. It has some cool growth tools, like it has a referral system. It has like swag you can give out. It has recommendations. It has ways to monetize, which is cool. I've used the referral system. The rest of it I haven't used too much. But overall, I've just been really enjoying the platform. It's a really solid platform to use.
That's really cool. A little bit cheaper than the MailChimp and things of the world. So
yeah, definitely a lot cheaper. Yeah,
I think on their site you can do the launch for 2,500 subscribers for free.
Yeah.
So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's great.
What else am I missing on Not a Designer? Anything?
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking actually about the journey at Epic Web Dev. So Kent C. Dodds is having his great big conference named after his big Epic Web course. And I got invited to speak. So I'm really pumped to kind of share more about the journey of what it's been like to learn and level up. What's been most interesting to me is just like how much work that newsletter takes. Like it takes 10 to 12 hours each week of just like heavy research and writing, because I really want it to be good, but I also want to learn myself. Like I want to level up, you know what I mean? So like I want to get to the bottom of this learning, and I want to do a really good job of understanding things. And it takes a lot of just like digging and researching to kind of distill and kind of come up with one key idea to then write about. So it's been a ton of work.
That's it's hard to get into the practice of that, but I feel like once you're kind of in it, like you know how it's working, and you can kind of keep tweaking and going through it. I was gonna say I had your link here.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
very cool. Man, that's coming up quick, isn't it?
It's coming up quick. Yep, that's not too far away.
All right, so this podcast might come out after you actually do the talk.
Oh,
so
cool.
We'll have to do some pushes beforehand.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Cool. What else am I missing about your story? I feel like there's so much more to unpack here that I haven't dove into. Is there anything you can think of that I'm missing?
That you're missing? Let me see.
I love the background and like your story and like how you build everything up. It's amazing to me, like it seems like everything you try, you're successful at it.
Oh my goodness. I am like the story of failure so hard. It's so funny. It's so funny that you say that, because I feel like most of my career has been trying so many things that have not worked out. So for Code Newbie, for example, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
For years, I wanted Code Newbie to be a product company. I really wanted to build like an app. And I just could never figure it out. For like literally the last 3 years of its existence, I worked so hard. I had a co-founder, and then it didn't work out. And I like built so many prototypes. I interviewed so many people, but it was so much of trying to build like a proper product company for the community. And I just could never figure out what to build. I couldn't come up with a compelling idea that reached kind of that threshold. I couldn't come up with a it was complicated, because my community is people who are looking to get started on their career. And usually they're doing it for financial reasons, right? They're doing it because they're not making enough money. They're not taking care of their families. They want a way to, reach that economic stability and, and move up in their lives and in the, in society in a lot of ways. And so they don't have a lot of money. So like, I didn't want to charge them for something when they're in it to move up the ladder for themselves. Like, it felt weird. You know what I mean? It felt weird to kind of charge
them. It's a really hard balance to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I never wanted to do that. So that always felt a little like funky. And so if you don't charge your users, well, then the only choice you have is like sponsorships, right? It's like sponsorships or like maybe a placement fee of some sort. And I did the sponsorship game for most of the, like, that's how we made our money, was entirely sponsorship based. And that worked out pretty well, but ultimately it wasn't, it's not, it feels weird to have to serve your customer is not your user, right? And it feels weird, like that disconnect between you're paying someone over here to get access to someone over here never like felt good. You know what I mean? Like it was fine. Like I was very respectful and very responsible with that responsibility. You know what I mean? Like I think I did a good job of handling that, but like it never felt right. Like it always felt a little funky. And so I did the sponsorship model kind of reluctantly. Like my sponsors were all great. They were wonderful to work with. They were an absolute joy, but I would much rather just have a direct relationship with the people that I'm serving, a direct financial relationship. So that always kind of just always felt a little funny.
And was that like piecing that together? Was that the product that you were trying to make, or were you
That's the product I was trying to.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a product. Yeah.
I didn't know if like Forum and like that Dev.to story was kind of like what you were trying to make, and so ultimately that worked out.
No, it was before that. So it was a couple of years before that is when I was trying to build something and just like couldn't come up with anything to build. And that's kind of when I realized that like Code Newbie was going to be what it is, and it just wasn't going to be more than that. And that was kind of when I was ready to move on from it and build something else. Nice. But ever since I first got into tech, when I was early 20s, all I ever wanted was to build like a proper like app. Like that's all I ever wanted. I just want to build like a proper app. That's all I've been searching for.
I feel like all of us are in there. Either
that's the dream, right? The dream is to like have a SaaS. Like that's everyone's dream. It's like it's like so it's just this pipe dream that we're all just like blindly chasing at this point.
I think it's part of a culture or a community too. Like you want to be part of something. So like even if someone came to me with a great idea, I'd be like, let's go build it. Like let's So it's always been hard. Like now that I'm a developer advocate, I've been that for like 6 years. It's always like pitching someone else's product, but it's like, I really want to feel that like ownership, and let's get started and let's go get our own VC money and like all that. I think a lot of devs getting into it, they feel that way.
Yeah, and so that's basically what ended up happening. So when I was in getting my MBA, I took this entrepreneurship class because I was very curious. I went to Columbia and I was very curious about what like the Ivy League has to say about entrepreneurship. I was like, ooh, like what are they going to teach me that no one else knows? I was very excited. It wasn't that interesting actually, but it was a cool idea.
Go watch The Social Network.
Yeah, basically. But we did like a pitch deck, and we did the financials, and I learned some things. Cool. But in that process, we had to pick an idea and pitch it. And so I picked this idea for audio courses, and that was really the thing that I was focused on. And I pitched it. My group really liked it. We ran with it. We did a deck. We did this thing. And then after the course was over, I said, I think I really like this idea. I want to see if I can actually like make it a real thing. And so to test to see, because you got to test your idea first, right? You got to like validate it. You got to make sure people actually care. And so I did a pre-order period where I put it out there and I said, let me try and do like pre-sales and see if anybody gives a crap. And I put it out there for 3 weeks. I said, if you're interested, we're going to do these audio courses. I think it was on AI at the time. And so I did like little previews and did little trailers. And I said, let me see if people like this. And I was hoping to get like maybe 50 to 100 people to pre-order it. And I got hundreds of people to pre-order it. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is great. This is a great sign. And this is, great validation. And I said, okay, well, now that I've taken people's money, I need to like build it. And so that required hiring people because I have to get producers to produce the content. I have to get researchers, and I built the web app, but I needed mobile developers to build the mobile app. And so, so I needed some help. And so I thought, okay, I guess I'm going to have to raise some money. And so I went out and I tried to raise $500,000, and I ended up getting commitments of over 3.4 million. And
yeah, incredible.
Yeah, it went really well. And you can't take all that money because you have to like negotiate and you have to think about equity and all that. So I ended up taking a little over 2.1 million. And this was at the end of 2020. And it was such a great time to raise money because I was in audio, and audio was really hot back then, right? This was like peak Clubhouse days. Yep. So everybody was looking for their audio investment. Everybody was looking for their like entry into the audio space. So people were like, were very eager and excited when they heard about my idea. And then also the fact that the pandemic was happening and we were like in the middle of it made pitching so much easier. Because I didn't have to leave my house.
Sure, yeah.
I did literally 20 pitches a week. I pitched over 100 people in 2 months.
Wow.
And that's just great. Physically impossible if it wasn't for the pandemic. I would have had to fly out to San Francisco and like sit and get a hotel and like, board a plane, sit in a lobby, pitch for 20 minutes. Like it would have been such a hassle. But because of the pandemic, I didn't have to leave anywhere. I was literally, I remember the last week that I was pitching, I actually had class. And again, because of the pandemic, class was remote. So I had on one screen, like my Zoom class, and I like tilted the camera just so you could like see the top of my head and you couldn't really see my face. You couldn't see that I wasn't distracted. And I would like do my pitch meetings on like a different camera. So like it was very efficient. But I pitched all these people and I raised this money and I went out and I hired people. I hired 3 producers. I hired 2 mobile devs. We started producing content. We built the app. We put it out there, and then no one listened.
Oh, geez.
No one hit play. No one downloaded the app. Like a few people did, but most people did not. And
so like, help me understand it. Is this like a podcast style where you would listen to, or is it like
it was storytelling. So it wasn't an interview. So it wasn't like a traditional podcast interview. It was more like a scripted podcast. So it was more kind of scripted storytelling, but it was explainers meant to teach you. So the objective was teaching. It wasn't like entertainment. So it was meant to be like fun, but mostly it was about teaching.
But I typically I'd be riding in my car. I'm going to put that on and listen to learn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like no one listened. And so I went back and I interviewed our users and I was like, what's going on? Like, why are you? Because the weird part was about a third, I think, if I remember correctly, of our people were subscribers. So a third of the people were like paying us every month and they didn't cancel. So they were still paying. They just weren't using the product. And so I went back to them and I was like, why are you still paying? Like you haven't canceled, like what's going on? And when I talked to them, it basically turned out that they ultimately didn't have a need for the product. We weren't solving a pain point for them. Okay. This was a nice to have. It was an aspirational purchase. It was a gym membership. It was, a good idea in theory. It was something that they told themselves they needed. But when it came down to it, they would always pick the music over me, right? They would always pick the fun podcasts that's like, you know, people chatting over like learning AI in audio.
Yeah.
So it just never quite like fit the lifestyle, and it never quite solved a problem.
That's
And so when
super.
that it was fascinating to learn. It was a tough lesson to learn, but it was a fascinating lesson to learn. And so I went back to my investors. This was literally 4 months after I raised money. I went back to my investors and I said, I don't think this idea is working. I don't think this is like this is going to pan out. I would like to pivot the idea to something else and like keep trying to see if I can get something to work. And they all agreed, and they were fine with it. I have great investors. They're absolutely amazing. And I went back and I tried to come up with an idea. And literally for the next 3 years, I came up with idea after idea after idea. I came up with so many prototypes, so many landing pages in so many different industries, so many different verticals. I followed pain points that I had in my life, pain points that my friends were having. I did so much, and I wanted to quit. Like every 6 months, I would like, you know, do a LinkedIn job search of like, what job could I get? A job would be so nice right now. And like, I wanted to quit so many times. I was depressed so much of those 3 years. Like it was just, they describe being like starting a business as like being dropped in a jungle, and you're just in the wilderness and you don't know where water is. You don't know how to get out. All you have is a machete, and you're just like slicing away at trees and bushes, trying to like you're just trying to find a path, and you don't know what direction you're going in. You don't know when you're going to stumble on anything. And that's really what it felt like. It felt like just slicing down bushes for years. It's you know, we talk a lot about financial runway when we talk about businesses, and that's really important. And I think that money management is a big part of the journey, but I think just as important is your emotional runway.
Oh yeah.
And it's managing just your own feelings. And I mean, I had like my biggest struggle was managing my feelings of like not feeling defeated, of still feeling hopeful, because you want to be optimistic, but you also kind of want to be a little realistic too. You know, like when things aren't working, you want to pay attention, but also maybe it's going to work if you just keep at it 1 week more. You know what I mean? Like how do you know when to quit? Like how do you know when to keep going, when to fall back? And so it was just such an emotional journey. And it got to a point last year where I had a conversation with my father-in-law, actually, who I was explaining to him like my journey with, because I started out a designer at that point for the sake of kind of learning about content creators and was trying to figure out what to do. And he messaged me and he said, I don't think you're going to find your big idea this way because you're too focused on finding the perfect idea. And the perfect idea doesn't exist. And it was such a powerful message that really resonated with me, because I was thinking, oh my goodness, he's totally right. I'm so fixated on like, it has to solve a problem. It has to be a big market. It has to be $1 billion idea. It has to be a good founder market fit. It has to be all these things. And there's always going to be a leap of faith that you take when you start a business. There's always going to be hope and just optimism that needs to kind of like carry you those extra steps. And I just wasn't getting that with any of these ideas because I was so strict with it. And I felt like because I was in this contrived situation where I was like forced to come up with an idea without it kind of organically coming to me, I was coming up with just like low quality ideas. And so I thought about that and I said, I think I need to just like give the money back and just get a job, and hopefully in maybe a couple of years I can come up with an idea organically and I can kind of try this over again. But right now I just don't see this happening. And so I went back to all my investors and I said, I think I'm ready to call it quits. I think I'm ready to throw in the towel and just kind of pause this journey. And they were all very kind and very understanding, and they all accepted. And then I had a call with one investor, Arlen Hamilton. She's one of my investors. And I had a call with her and she said, okay, so what are you going to do when you give the money back? And I said, well, honestly, I don't feel very employable right now, so I don't think I can get a job. So I'm thinking of like putting together income through different ways. I'm going to see if I can do some consulting. I'm going to see if I can do maybe I'll like do podcasting again. I'm going to take Not a Designer seriously, see if I can take that to the next level, do some speaking, kind of put together my income. And she said, okay, and what would you do if you didn't have to worry about income? And I said, well, to be honest, I kind of came up with this idea like last week that I was playing with around people who were in my position, because when I'm thinking about all the different things I want to do and ways I want to make money, I don't really have a good system to kind of share my tools and my resources. Like I don't have a good system to manage my income streams and kind of figure out how to sell myself and my services. And so I was kind of playing with like a product around that idea. But again, I want it to be organic and I want to kind of think of it, naturally. So like that's the space I'd probably like play in if I didn't have to worry about income. And I described the product to her in more detail. And she goes, but Saron, that's a VC backable idea. And I was like, shit, I think she's right. and so she goes, I think you should go back to your investors. And I think that's the idea you should work on and see if you can keep the money and build that instead. And I was like, but I'm going to look so stupid. Like I just quit. I just promised all this money back and I'm moving on. I'm going to like go back on my word. And she's like, don't worry about that. They'll understand. Like they'll be happy to keep your money with you.
That's amazing that you can have a conversation like that with an investor. That's really
cool.
Like
it's so funny because I'm on, Twitter a ton and listening to like things people say about their investors. And like, I just can't relate. Like my investors are amazing. They're so supportive. They're so kind. I got really lucky with who I have on my team for sure. And so I went back to my my investors and I said, I have this idea for supporting people with multiple streams of income. I think I'm gonna go. I'd like to kind of pursue that more seriously. And if you're still in, would love to keep going with this. And most of my investors were supportive. I think I had like 4 of my small angel investors who were like, I think I'm done. I'd rather have my money back. But all my big investors stayed in. My lead investors stayed in. So we kept most of the cash. And then I brought back my marketing person, and we launched our big community called Big Cash Money. And so for me, I was talking to my husband, and he said, with Code Newbie, you didn't have to, bigcashmoney.com. That's right. And so when I was talking to my husband, he said, you never did user interviews for Code Newbie, but it seemed like you always knew what to build. Like you always knew what to create for your community. Why is that? And I said, well, I'm talking to my community every single week. So I feel like I know them really well. Yeah. And I said, I need to find a place to talk to my users every single week, to talk to them, to figure out what's on their mind, what's going on, etc. And so I thought, well, Discord is a great place for that. And I started a small Discord group just with me and 3 of my friends that's been working really well. And I thought maybe I can copy that same template and do it in like an application basis for people with multiple streams of income. And so we launched Big Cash Money 2024 as our kind of New Year's resolution initiative. So it launched on January 2nd. And the idea was if you have multiple streams of income, if you're trying to figure out how to level up, how to make a ton of money this year, we'll supply a growth and accountability coach who will be there for you, who'll check in on you. We'll do Monday accountability syncs where you'll do like a stand up and share your goals for the week. On Fridays, we'll do Friday feelings where you can talk about, what's been going on, how you've been feeling, how you've been doing emotionally. And it'll be this like really kind, open community for people who are serious about making money. So we've been doing that for a little over a month, and it's been going really well. I feel like I've learned so much about these people and about their goals, and I feel like I've made new friends on this platform, and it's been like a really great way to do product development, but to also just genuinely help people who have the same goals as I do in terms of making and maximizing the revenue for the year. So that's been a really big part of the journey too. Yeah,
that's amazing. I love that as a New Year's resolution product too.
Yeah,
it's really
cool. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
Well, awesome. I think we're probably getting to the point that we have to pivot off of all this fun talk. I'm all like amped up now. This has been great. But we're gonna do our little thing we call perfect picks. And you sound super excited about this book you're reading, so I'm gonna let you go first.
Sure, yeah. So it's this book called The Happiness Project. It's kind of old. It's from 2009. I read it in 2009 when it first came out. And I remember I really, really loved it. It was really good. And recently I was thinking a lot about just kind of my own like mood fluctuations and trying to figure out how do I bring kind of everyday joy into my life. And this is such a great, to give fair warning, it's not a deep book, right? Like it's not gonna solve your depression. If you have like real deep problems, that's not the kind of book this is. But if you're just kind of feeling like, my life is overall pretty stable, I'm living a good life, but I'm still not finding like everyday joy. I'm a little grumpier than I should be. I'm not as grateful as I should. If you feel just kind of like off in your day, it gives just really good, helpful reminders and new ideas and strategies to introduce happiness into like everyday living. So it's just been like a really fun, easy read. It has something on work. It has something on finances. It has a chapter on parenting. I'm a relatively new parent. My daughter's 18 months. I was really interested in that chapter. Yeah. That's been a ton of fun. And so it's just, it's a very light, easy read of like ways to just introduce joy and happiness into your daily routine, into your relationships in a way that I feel is very accessible to people. So it's an oldie but a goodie, and I've been really enjoying rereading it.
And you said this is your second time through, right?
Yeah, it's either my second or third time reading it. I hadn't read it in like 10 years, so yeah, it's been really good.
It's cool to pick stuff up again like
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
My perfect pick is something I've been trying to figure out. Something my son and I like. He's very like design oriented, likes drawing, and like I try to get him to code all the time. He's like, I don't want to do that. And so like I'm always trying nerdy things and sports stuff, and he's always trying. But gaming, we can usually kind of come together on.
Nice.
Our challenge with gaming is like it's usually like we both love Zelda, and Zelda's too hard to play as a 2-player. And I kept reading online about this It Takes Two, and I asked him, and he's like, I tried it out. It was kind of boring. I made him try this because I was like, it sounds really cool to me. And so we started playing this, and it's unbelievable to have both of us so focused, like in the game, and we're just hanging out. Like 3 hours went by the other night, and we're just talking and like playing the game because you can't like progress without the other person's help. So it's not like Mario where one person can go beat everything and you're just hanging out. Like you have to be fully involved. And it's been one of the coolest games and like has, given us more opportunity to hang out more. And he's becoming a full-on teenage, he'll be 15 and he likes to like just take off on his own and go watch his phone. So this has brought us a little back together. I like it.
Nice. That's beautiful.
It's been a fun game.
Cool. Very cool.
Well, Saron, thank you so much for joining me today. I loved listening to your full story, and I can't wait to see what's next. To be honest,
thank you.
Like, I think you have so many things in the works and that you're building. It's really exciting.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, anytime. We'll see you next time.
All right, take care.